Well, it's a brand new day and a brand new opportunity to do great things for God and country. My name is Benjamin Akakpo. We call this the AM show. Wherever you are, if you've already joined us, well, good morning and welcome aboard. Now, it's quite a lineup we have for you today, and we're going to kickstart everything with the news review. Like we did last week, we're going back to Professor Ransford Jampo, political science lecturer at the University of Ghana. He'll be joining us for a no-holds-barred news review, not interview, but news review. And we're going to get into salient matters like, for example, it's 3 years on since Ahmed Hussein Swale was gunned down. Yesterday marked the 3rd anniversary. We'll be getting into that, among other matters, in the newspapers this morning. But the two topical matters we're going to be considering, one of them has to do with our Black Stars. Now, they are not exactly soaring right now after the last encounter with Gabon. They were this close to a win, but then it ended in a draw. How do we get past this hurdle? We'll be interacting with Didi Dramani, a coach, a man with vast experience. He'll be telling us about his expectations and what the way forward could be for Milovan Rajevac's team, the Black Stars, our team. But after that, we're going to be talking about the hard matters, and I'm talking about our economy. Our economy seems not to be in the best of footings. The Bloomberg reports, Fitch and its downgrade of our economy, and the fact that going out there, creditors look at Ghana and they feel, well, considering all the myriad circumstances we're dealing with, we are not exactly credit worthy. That is a big problem for us. Our bonds are not doing well out there, falling 10% within the last week and a half. And looking at our expenditure, over 20 billion that we're hoping to get or acquire from, local bonds and all of that. And the fact that we're going to be left with a pittance, so to speak, about 3.7 billion Ghana cedis to expend locally, among other matters. If you look at our debt to GDP ratio, it is indeed a big problem. So this morning we dissect those matters as we speak to economists, as we speak to sector players, to get a feel of what exactly the situation looks like for Ghana and what we could be looking at moving forward. We'll be having an interaction with our guests on that all-important matter. Do join us for that. Lord Mensah, Professor Lord Mensah, he is senior lecturer at the University of Ghana Business School, together with Dr. Ebo Turkson, a senior lecturer at the Economics Department of the University of Ghana. We'll bring you sports and the news and much more. So do stay with us. We'll be right back with the news. Let's start with our very first news story. And the Ghana Police Service says its men have had to shoot dead a man who stabbed a police officer to death in the Bono East region. The now deceased police officer, number 38717, General Sergeant Anobil of the Brekum Station on Saturday, met his untimely death while on duty. In a statement circulated on its official social media sites, they say the suspect, Yaupepra, is an ex-convict reported to the police station to assist the police in a case he was allegedly involved in. The suspect unexpectedly turned and stabbed the police officer several times. The police officer died shortly after reaching the hospital for treatment. Here is a statement signed by the Director General of Public Affairs, ACP Kwesi Ofori. And the statement reads, police officer stabbed to death his assailant, subsequently shot dead. And a police officer number 38717, General Sergeant Bright Anobil of Brekum Station, was on Saturday, January 15, 2022, stabbed to death by Yaupepra, a suspect in a case being investigated by the police. The suspect was later killed. It goes on to say, preliminary investigations have established that Yaupepra, the suspect, an ex-convict, had been invited to the Brekum police station to assist with investigations. Now, on arrival at the vicinity of the police station, the suspect unexpectedly turned on the police sergeant and stabbed him severely on the neck and other parts of the body and escaped. The officer was rushed to the Holy Family Hospital for treatment but died shortly after admission. A special manhunt exercise was initiated. It says, in addition, a delegation from the police headquarters led by COP Christian Tete Yonu, Director General Administration, are visiting the region to commiserate with family. We thank the general public for the support and words of encouragement to the police and our personnel during these difficult times. And it's signed by ACP Kwesiofori, Director General, Public Affairs. And that is the statement from the Ghana Police Service. Meanwhile, police in the Ashanti region have mounted a search for 2 gunmen suspected to have snatched a red Toyota Corolla vehicle at Santase in Kumasi with a baby inside the car. This comes after police retrieved the vehicle, which was abandoned at Dakudum, a few meters from where the vehicle was snatched after a chase by the police patrol team. Now, police found the baby safe inside and has since reunited the child with the mother. Ashanti Regional Police PRO Godwin Ahianyo explains.
Sunday, 16 January 2022, police had information that a red Toyota Corolla with a child on board has been snatched from its owner at Santase at a church called Good Hope Chapel by some 2 unidentified gunmen. The police, upon receipt of the information, swiftly set out all patrol vehicles and motorbikes within the metropolis in search of the vehicle and its occupant, that's the suspect. Sensing danger on the approach of a police vehicle and a taxi cab, the suspect abandoned the vehicle around Akudum and fled into a nearby bush. As we speak, the vehicle has since been driven to the regional police headquarters and the child reunited with the mother. Meanwhile, the police patrol vehicles are pursuing the suspect and all other operational units have been activated to assist in that regard. I would like to use this opportunity or this platform to reassure the general public of the command's resolve to ensuring that the metropolis is safe as well as the region. We would also like to appeal to the general public to give information, any credible information that will lead to the activities of criminals within the metropolis and the region at large, to be able to clamp down on these suspected criminals. Thank you.
Well, on to our next story, and government's quest to enhance STEM education in the country is on course as an ultra-modern facility being constructed at Abomoso in the Etiwa West district of the Eastern region is almost complete. It is one of many STEM schools to be constructed in the country. A Deputy Minister of Education, John Intim Fojo, who toured the site, indicated pupils would be equipped to be inventors and innovators to facilitate growth in the country.
The facility is one of the 10 science, technology, engineering and mathematics, that is STEM schools, that government through the Ministry of Education is constructing. This ultra-modern facility, according to the consultant, will provide comfort and also boost interest of students who will be studying STEM courses. The science-focused school being built at Abomoso in the Etiwa West district of the Eastern region has 2 V blocks comprising a 24-unit and 29-unit classrooms. A Deputy Minister of Education, John Intim Fojo, has been given some more details.
Within these blocks, we have 12 units that are dedicated to be laboratories. We are going to have ICT laboratories, we are going to have science laboratories, chemistry lab, physics lab, biology lab. We're going to have robotic lab as well. And so, apart from the classroom block and the laboratories, we do have dormitories. 2 dormitories, one for girls, one for boys, with good capacity, with ultra-modern facilities, with good washrooms. At the same time, we have an assembly hall that can take not less than 2,000 students. We have a dining hall of similar capacity. We have we have administration block as well. We have a sick bay that is fitted with nurses bungalow that are going to be resident here to ensure that healthcare delivery here right here on campus is very creditable. At the same time, we have on this campus an ultra-modern library that is going to house books for reading of students. We have thought about teachers because we don't want to only plan for students and have our teachers having to stay outside and struggling with accommodation. So we have 2 accommodation unit blocks that can cater to 12 teachers and their families. We do also have a principal's accommodation and 2 vice principals' bungalows.
According to him, Ghana must progress and also increase the annual engineering graduates to boost the country's innovations.
Oftentimes, you have had people contend that we have very intelligent and smart students elsewhere. That is why even at the age of 12, we hear stories of students at the age of 12, at the age of 15 and 17 coming out with inventions and patenting some very strong innovations that are contributing to the rapid socio-economic development of their countries. But I always contend that we have more intelligent and gifted children and students in Ghana than any other country. So whatever facility that those students have been exposed to that is accelerating their giftedness, President Akufo-Addo, Dr. Baumia, and Dr. Yao Seduchum have decided that we bring the same facilities right here in Ghana. And so the kind of facilities you find here, they are just like you find in any top school in any advanced country. And it's going to be free. So these are schools that are going to have higher quality than even some private schools. People, pay dollars and what have you, huge sums of money to access in many other countries, even in this country. This is going to outcompete those schools, and it's going to be free.
The Deputy Minister added these schools will be staffed with quality teachers as well.
We assure students that STEM education has kicked off and that Ghana is going to make a difference. We are going to resort to education as a credible strategy for rapid socio-economic transformation.
The project consultant Samuel Adai assured the facility will be ready in February.
In fact, you hear people saying we haven't built any secondary school from scratch. At least this one you've seen from Virgin Forest. We are almost through. So we promised the minister within a month, we'll make sure at least we get to a usable stage so that the school can start.
On to the next story, and the newly installed Taviefe Sreme Divisional Chief Togbe Amega Jevuje IV has promised to partner government and the private sector to harness development for his area. He hopes to lobby both sectors to turn the area into an industrial hub by establishing manufacturing practices and outgrower schemes to create jobs and promote the growth of the local economy. Speaking to Joy News after a colorful coronation, he promised to provide a launch pad for his subjects to engage in economic activities to enhance their livelihoods.
Taviefe Sreme is a peri-urban community in the whole municipality of the Volta region where most residents engage in farming. Nonetheless, the majority of the youth are shying away from farming and seeking corporate, industry, and other menial jobs. Due to this, the newly installed Taviefe Sreme Divisional Chief, Togbe Amega Jevuje IV, is hoping to partner with government and private investors to deliver jobs for his people.
One district, one factory.
I will work with the government to situate a factory here under the one district, one factory policy. This would create jobs for the youth and graduates. We are ready to engage any investor. We have litigation-free lands in our area ready for development. We will establish branches across the 16 regions of the country to feed the factory with raw materials. The product will be exported. While at it, he believes that human capacity building is another factor to consider which would contribute to develop the community.
University.
The government knows we need a university here because our population has been increasing. We also need bigger hospitals and police stations in other parts of the community. For instance, the Taviefe Sreme New Town. Taviefe Town. The traditional council is hopeful Togbe Amegajem Vuja IV would deliver on his promises.
There are a lot of projects that Togbe Ajaya Oche II have put on the head of Togbe Vuji IV. He sees him as a dynamic person, well invested in developments, education, business, to bring happiness, hope, peace back to Taviefe traditional area. We are happy with a sense that it has all it takes to do all this. He has been installed as a chief of Taviefe Stremen, but he has been given a lot of responsibility that can bring Taviefe Stremen and Taviefe traditional area back to its glory.
Togbe Amegajem Vuja IV, known in private life as Kofi Harrison Agbeture, is an entrepreneur and a contractor who deals in general construction. Fred Kwame Asari, Joy News, Taviefe Stremen.
Well, back here in Accra, more than 40 people have been summoned to appear before the Ablekuma North Municipal Assembly for failing to clean their immediate environment. This exercise is the pilot program of Operation Clean Your Frontage launched by the President Akufo-Addo. The Municipal Chief Executive of the Ablekuma North Assembly, Kofi Ofori, led a team of sanitation officers and a task force to inspect the municipality. Michael Ashali was with the team and has filed this report.
Some shop owners in Dakuman arguing with officials of the Ablekuma North Assembly. One of them, George Iwa, insists he cannot be issued a summons for not cleaning the streets because that's not his job.
The
pilot enforcement of Operation Clean Your Frontage, as it has been codenamed, revealed widespread ignorance of the existence of the bylaw. Chief Executive of the Ablekuma North Municipality, Kofi Ofori, who has been leading a team of sanitation officers to enforce the directive, has been providing some education, insisting ignorance of the law would not be tolerated when the policy is fully implemented in February 2022.
If he says that when they come to the assembly, they will understand. They will be cautioned. Those who are supposed to be cautioned will be cautioned. And we will leave it like this. We've given them, that's why we gave them about a week to clear the place. Those who will be free are those who, when we come back within the week and they have cleared and they are doing what we have asked them to do, they are complying with the rules. But those who will not, we send those one to court.
He will, however, not allow them to continue with their errant ways. The exercise was conducted in 3 separate areas. Dakuman, Odoko, Your Frontage will continue till it's officially rolled out in February. Michael Ashali's report for Joy News.
You have to keep the gutter clean and your environment. Look at it.
Well, that's how we wrap the AM News this morning. But coming up, we have the news review. We're hosting Professor Ransford Jampo, political science lecturer at the University of Ghana. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome to the news review, and we're going to be digging into the papers. We'll be joined shortly by Professor Ransford Jampo, but quite a stack of papers that I have here this morning, a mountain of them, and we'll be going through all of them. But I just wanted to start off on this note. Ahmed Hussein Swali. Yes, yesterday marked exactly 3 years since he was killed. And it's quite a situation we have on our hands. Of course, we recall like situations like the one to do with Member of Parliament, former Member of Parliament, J.B. Dankwa Edu. It is said that the wheels of justice grind slowly and exceedingly fine. But how slow is too slow? That is the big question. So it's one of the matters that I'm going to be running by the likes of Professor Ransford Jumpo, and it would be interesting to find out, if you could connect with us on social media, what your take is. 3 years on, we still have no finality to that issue, and it is indeed a big worry. But let's start with the Daily Graphic newspaper. First ever actual corruption survey, and Shraj GSS evaluate 250,000 households. First ever actual corruption survey. Now, the story says the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice and the Ghana Statistical Service are undertaking the first ever actual corruption survey to provide the right information on the levels of corruption in the country. Currently, the two institutions are evaluating about 250,000 households using the methodology of the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, that is UNOC, a United Nations corruption agency, for the survey. Data collection of officials are currently on the field across the country. Now, in an exclusive interview with the Daily Graphic in Accra last Friday, the Commissioner of Shraj, Mr. Joseph Whittle, said the survey would not only expose how corruption manifested in households and the regional prevalence, but also serve as a baseline to deploy effective measures better than what the Corruption Perception Index offered. Now, let's paint a proper picture. We have the CPI, the Corruption Perception Index, perception, what people think. This seeks to go further to establish what is, based on some evidential, undertakings. And so it would be interesting to find out how this pans out and what exactly it will expose in terms of the real fabric of corruption in our country, Ghana. And of course, that would also aid in the fight against graft. It's a positive move, and we wish Shraj and the Ghana Statistical Service the very best. Let's quickly go on the international front briefly before we circle back to Ghana. A massive demonstration in Mali against ECOWAS, and Malians, that's on page 5, by the way. Malians have taken to the streets en masse after the country's ruling military called for protests against stringent sanctions imposed by the Economic Community of West African States over delayed elections. Thousands of people wearing the national colors of red, yellow, and green gathered in a central square in Mali's capital last Friday for a rally staged by the military government. And you should see the throng. You should check out the details from the Daily Graphic newspaper. If you can go online, you can check out the massive crowd that went out there. But of course, ECOWAS has also stuck to its guns in terms of some of these sanctions to not turn a blind eye or give a pat on the back to some of these putschists or coup makers. So how will things pan out, especially in Mali's situation? Only time will tell. Ousted Mali president dies aged 76, and tied to that, Ibrahim Boubacar Keita, Mali's former president, passing at age 76. Let's move on to some other stories. Let's get to the middle spread of the paper. But maybe even before we get there, Reflections, E-Levy. It's an opinion piece. And I'm only going to make mention of it because guess what? In analyzing, assessing us, the likes of Fitch, the global financial agencies, among others, when they were looking at our government or our economy's credibility, one of the things they looked at was the fact that the E-Levy, which hopefully by November last year would have seen the light of day, didn't. And now we're still grappling with it. Don't you forget, Parliament reconvenes on the 25th of this month. And they're looking at the fact that the government was not able to see that through. Of course, some 6+ billion Ghana cedis expected from there to shore up the economy and serve myriad purposes. So right now, what it means is without the E-Levy, if the 1.75% does not come through, it means that it's going to affect our fortunes as we seek money out there on the international front. On the back page, let's check out some sporting stories. Even as AFCON is going on, our league is also ongoing. And a brace by Hearts bulky striker Kofi Koji and a goal each by Salim Adams and Daniel Efriye Banier gave defending champions Accra Hearts Evoke an emphatic 4-1 victory over visiting 11 Wonders at the Accra Sports Stadium yesterday. So currently, if you look at the league log, it's still Asante Kotoko on top with 27 points. With 12 matches played, they have a game in hand. Hearts Evoke is in 6th. They've done really well coming up. They have 20 points, and Elmina Sharks are at the very bottom. Let's move on to our next newspaper. Let's do the Ghanaian Times newspaper. My apologies. And it says government releases 154 million plus Ghana cedis to SHSs. That's according to Dr. Yawase Educhum. Rehabilitate our roads to facilitate socio-economic activities. Akachi Hoti, chief, saying that. We know the Hungarian president has been in town. Hungary is to support the construction of wastewater treatment plants in 13 regions. That's the Hungarian president as he toured the Kumasi plant. And 7 perish in fire outbreak at Budumburam. That story is on page 17. Let me bring you some details of that. And a family of 7, including their 4-month-old baby, were on Saturday, so sad, Saturday morning, burnt to a crisp beyond recognition in a fire outbreak at Big Apple, Budumburam, in the Gumwa East district of the Central region. The deceased have been identified as Robert Asan Donko, headmaster of the Budumburam Primary School, his wife Abna Ejewa, and their 5 children, one of whom is physically challenged. Now, during a visit to the scene, the Ghanaian Times observed that Mr. Donko's apartment was the only part of the building which was affected by the fire. All other rooms remained intact. Residents had gathered at the scene to observe, and the charred bodies were picked by the Ghana National Fire Service team, which arrived at the scene to salvage the situation. Our hearts and condolences, I should say, go to the family, neighbors, and all of us, in fact. This is a very sad way to kickstart the year. But tied to the Ghana National Fire Service, 10 have been arrested over Ghana National Fire Service recruitment scams. I'll give you details. That's on page 3. And 10 persons have been arrested for allegedly collecting huge sums of money from unsuspecting young Ghanaians under the pretext of assisting them to enlist into the Ghana National Fire Service. The suspects were arrested in a special operation by the police and fire service at a hotel in Hong Kong near La Paz in Accra last Friday. They were reported to have collected money ranging from 10,000 and 15,000 Ghana cedis, respectively. Documents, including letterheads of security agencies, have since been retrieved. But wait a minute. You have 10,000 cedis, you have 15,000 cedis, and you just want to get into one of these services, and you are willing to cough up that money. You are not contemplating using that money to circle through, and maybe make something out of it, think entrepreneurial or something. You go and give that money to a quack, some charlatan who takes your money, and now you've lost your money and you've lost the purported opportunity. I'm not saying, but let's just be very careful, very cautious out there, because a lot of these people are out there. Plus, I heard this from the Ghana National Fire Service. They don't do recruitments or training exercises in hotels. Sometimes you must look at the signals. So once you're ending up in a hotel somewhere, you should be asking yourself some questions. The carnage on our roads is getting worrying again. It's a new year, but same story, if not worse. The most recent, 3 die, 15 injured in accident at Ekumfi, Ekoti, and 3 people have been confirmed dead, while 15 others are in a critical condition after a fatal accident at Ekumfi, Ekoti, or Bojoano, in the Ekumfi district of the Central region. So more of those stories. Let's do a few more, and we shall wrap. Now, this is another issue of interest, and we brought it to you. A cop was stabbed to death at Brekum, and a policeman was on Saturday stabbed to death by a suspect he attempted to arrest in the Brekum East municipality of the Bono region. We brought you details of the story, but the main point is what would give people the temerity, because this is an officer of the law, what would give someone the temerity to take on a police officer and stab the person? He actually used an okapi knife, and this is a very disturbing development. Well, let me say a very good morning to Professor Ransford Jampo. Prof, if you can hear me, good morning to you.
Hi, good morning.
Great. It's a great pleasure to have you for another morning. I've already started with the papers, but I just want us to take a quick look at a few items in between, even as we take a look at the papers. The one I was just doing has to do with that police officer who has been stabbed in Brekum. And indeed, He was trying to effect an arrest, and this person turned on him with an okapi knife, and you know, just slashed him at the neck, and it's led to his death. Of course, the person was also sought out and gunned down. And I don't know what your quick thoughts are, but before you get into your thoughts, Prof, can you turn on your video so we can see you? Great, 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 great. So at least we can have some visuals of you. All right.
Well,
can you go landscape for us, Prof? Can you turn it the other way?
Like this.
Okay. I think that should work for us.
All right.
Right. Okay. So your quick reaction to this this gentleman in Brekum simply taking the law into his own hands and with impunity stabbing a police officer. Your quick reaction to that?
Well, it's unfortunate. I think that these things must not be countenanced. Anyone who wears a police uniform represents the state, and that's how come on the road you see a very big articulated vehicle driving. A police officer will just raise his hand or her hand,
right,
and the articulated driver would have to stop because the uniform he wears or she wears represents the power and authority of the state, which we must all respect. And so if for whatever reason you would go and have the audacity to be able to kill a cop or a police officer, I mean, it points to impunity of the highest order and something that must not be countenanced, regardless of whatever the police may have done, which you may see to be wrong. We all must not have the audacity to want to challenge the state in that manner. Otherwise, then we may be creating chaos in the country, especially so when, like I said, as you rightly narrated, the police officer was just going to effect an arrest. And if you are going to effect an arrest, the arrest is lawful. And if it is lawful, then we don't have to extend impunity in our country to that level. Otherwise, like I said, we may be creating a jungle for ourselves.
Well, that in fact is what ensued, and that has left a very bad taste in our mouths. Yesterday, he was flown into Accra, the police headquarters, and the rest is in the hands of the police. But I also just wanted to take your quick thought on this. It's been 3 years since we lost Ahmed Hussein Swale. In fact, the date he passed, January 16, 2019, which was yesterday, so it's been 3 years already. We can remember the likes of J.B. Danko Edu, among others. But you, Prof, I know how you feel, how passionate you are about some of these things. I was sharing earlier that we say the wheels of justice grind slowly, but exceedingly fine. But how slow is too slow in this instance? Have we addressed this in the right manner as a justicial system and as a country?
Well, I think in terms of investigations, we've not done so well. It appears that in our part of the world, people can simply get away with murder, and they would know how to cover their butts because sometimes those investigating may also I don't know, they don't have the needed the kinds of things that they need to be able to fasten or quicken investigations. People may not even want to proffer adequate information. We all live in a society where some of these things happen, but sometimes even those who have access to information about those who may have done something wrong may want to keep the information to themselves. Something happens in a community, and then people come around you to tell you that express their condolence, or they express their sympathy to you. But when you tell them that, let us go to court, or I want to go to court to fight this particular thing, you call on them to come to court as witnesses. They say, no, as for court, I don't want to go. So some of these things we would do well as a nation if we have a citizenry that is willing to also volunteer information, particularly when clearly we know that something that may have happened, the only way that can be unraveled and be dealt with is when people have, or the police have information. Right. If you don't have that information, then it becomes difficult. So I want to believe that those who may have committed this crime, they live in society. And definitely there is somebody who saw them. It is important that we volunteer some of these crucial information to help the police also investigate. It appears some are also saying that the willingness on the part of authorities to investigate is low, but I don't have much evidence to that effect, so I can't go that route. But the point is, it is very unfortunate that this thing happened and no one has been brought to book.
Very interesting. Right before we get into the Daily Guide newspaper, though, and there's one major story I'd like to look at, two of them, in fact. But I know you, Tad, you've been interacting with the National Labour Commission and, of course, the employer, government. I would like to know what the latest is from your end. I know that there are plans moving forward. I mean, the NLC has directed that your strike is illegal and that you should go back, the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission. And I don't know whether that is going to pan out. I know your individual, in the individual campuses, consultation is going on. Give us the latest on that development and what we can expect this week.
Well, the Labour Commission says, in its view, our strike is illegal. And it's simply because they didn't receive a copy or any notification from us that we are going to go on strike. I mean, it is sad that when people are fighting for their livelihood, we want to thwart their efforts with procedural issues. Everybody, way back in November, let's not even talk about November, from somewhere July, August last year, we started doing this. But the last time we wrote to the authorities was in November last year, around 11th November, that we told them that there are issues that have not been addressed and that we are calling on them. We had entered into an agreement with government that they said they were undertaking a market survey whose finding was going to be implemented in October last year. And the implementation of the findings was supposed to see a transformation or an improvement in the conditions of service of lecturers. So they said October, and we told them that we are tired of they giving us dates and time and not going according to them. And so if you say October, we want to extend it from October to December, so that we'll be sure that by December you would implement the contents of the market survey report. In December, we asked that we had not seen any, we told them we had not seen any implementation. They should give us a copy of the report to study, so that was the middle of December, so that by the end of December, we'll know what will be in for us. They said they would not give it to us. And so getting to the end of December, we signaled that we'll be going on strike. Then quickly they called us and said, let us do a presentation and hand over the report to you. But we are looking for money. We are not looking for reports. With the greatest of respect, we don't chew reports. When we're asking that our conditions of service be improved, you have handed over a report to us. Then when we said we wanted to go on strike, we served notices to all. And when it came to the Labour Commission, the UTAG officer who went to the Labour Commission to give their notification to them told us that when he went there, the security officer there had been ordered not to receive any notification from UTAG because, according to them, they were on holidays. And you said sometimes they send letters to us even via social media. And so if they don't want to receive, why don't we email and why don't we find other electronic means, which our president told us he did. But of course, you know, in the usual Machiavellian strategy and tactics, they called us to a meeting. We got there and said, no, we have not received. And so it is your strike, because we have not received it,
right.
Your strike is illegal. And I keep asking myself, Akaku, in your history of the National Labour Commission, do you know any strike that they have declared legal before? For them, every strike is illegal. But you see, that kind of posturing is a needless attempt that we use to thwart people, the efforts of people who have legitimate concern that must be addressed.
Let me ask you briefly, Prof. Do you feel the National Labour Commission's posturing itself is problematic? The way the National Labour Commission deals with matters of this, regard, do you feel it is problematic, how it works?
Well, National Labour Commission is always used or always allow, give itself the opportunity to use its powers as, to create problems for labor and to thwart the efforts of labor. You see, you are supposed to be an independent arbiter between government and labor. And so when government is not fulfilling its side of the bargain, you deal with them. And when labor is not doing what is right, you deal with them.
Right.
But when government is not fulfilling its side of the bargain, you keep quiet.
Right.
And then when labor strikes because of frustration, then you say their strike is illegal. And so my point is that people are fighting for the improvement of their conditions of service.
Okay.
You cannot use procedure and some of these bottlenecks to thwart the effort. Yes, in their view, they say that the strike is illegal. We do not want to create situations of lawlessness in our country. And so if you say it is illegal, what we want to do, or what we have started doing, is to communicate the position of the Labour Commission to our members.
Right.
We should be mindful of the fact that UTAG affairs is not about leadership. UTAG matters is about the view and the will of members.
So far, just to conclude on this matter, Prof. So far, what is the message you are getting from your membership, at least generally? What is it pointing to? Do you continue with the strike?
Well, all members, we have 15 public universities in Ghana across the country. And so the leadership of these public universities are supposed to be informing their members. My understanding is that a lot of information session and briefing session have gone on. University of Ghana will do ours today. And so if we do ours today, you get to know the outcome. Note that lecturers are not zombies. Okay. Lecturers are thinking people. Right. So when you speak to them, they would also have their view to proffer. Okay. And so we'll communicate and brief them, and whatever they will say, would also let the public know.
Okay, thank you so much for the scoop on that, Prof. Wrapping up on the Daily Guide, GNPC rebuts ASEP's Anadako claims. Recently ASEP put out there some damning information about the GNPC and that third party in the Cayman Islands. There's also Ghana 620 million Ghana cedi Capital Bank scandal. I can cough 130 million Ghana cedis. That's according to Ato Esse, and the story is on page 3 of the paper. Let's now do the Finder newspaper, and this one comes back to you. So, statement attributed to Earl Ankra, that is Earl Ankra of the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission, is malicious. That is on page 4. Let me just give you some details of that. And of course, you know the statement, one that you reacted to, the one where he was saying that if you don't want to be a lecturer or teacher, you can quit. But The Fair Wages and Salaries Commission has expressed regret at a news story that supposedly wrongfully attributed statements Mr. Ankra did not make to him. The commission noted that Mr. Ankra never said anywhere that University Teachers Association of Ghana executives failed to honor an invitation of the National Labour Commission on Wednesday. A statement signed by lawyer for the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission explained. And to a generic question on the entitlements of an employee, he elaborated on the obligation of both employers and employees to exercise good faith within the workspace, the absence of which can lead to a worst-case scenario. It was not in direct reference to UTAG. In effect, responses to two different questions were mischievously treated as a one. Does this satisfy you? They are saying that, on technicalities, they are saying his response was to both employer and employee and not targeted at UTAG. So some of what may have been put out there was not necessarily the intent. Would that make you want to withdraw some of the comments you put out against him and the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission, Prof?
No, but you see, the statement they issued was not, they didn't talk specifically about what got a lot of us, angry.
Right.
What got a lot of us angry was the fact that he was alleged to have said that if you are not satisfied with your conditions of service, then you should resign. And that was what a lot of our members got so charged and infuriated about. I must admit that as a Christian, I believe my attention has been drawn to the fact that it appears my usage of the word foolish was not appropriate, and I have
Do you regret using it?
I think I could have used a better word, even though I have always not minced words in my feeling and my conviction. I think that whether he said it or he didn't say it, maybe I could have used a better word. And,
right.
If I get opportunity, I won't use that word publicly.
So are you apologizing to Ankra then and the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission?
Well, my position is clear. If he didn't say this, he must publicly say, clarify it himself. If he's able to publicly clarify that he never said that if we are not happy with our conditions of service, we should resign, then I can also know how to tweak my own response. But generally, he who is cutting a path would not know his back is crooked. And I have decent people behind me who would also counsel you here and there. And so even my own members, even though they were excited, they themselves again said, yes, we want you to fight for us, but maybe these words, you may have to look at them again. And I have taken the suggestions in good faith. And so, like I said, if I have to respond again, I would not use that word.
Okay. Some more stories from the Finder newspaper. And police place 10,000 Ghana Cedi bounty on Radio Adan attackers. Prof, I'm sure you followed that story as well. Brutal attack, in fact, on Radio Adan. And they are assuming that it was tied to, the salt mining, Electrochem and all of that. But Electrochem has come out to say it had nothing at all to do with that instance. There's also Labour Commission directs UTAG to call off strike. And there's this one. So two more stories to wrap. 142% rise in road traffic offences in 2021 from 2,831 in 2020 to 6,877 in 2021. Obviously, a great cause for worry. But the one I'd like you to quickly respond to, Senor Hosi, last week, I believe it was Friday, was talking about the 1992 Constitution and urgent reforms needed to avoid death of the Constitution proposed. There's a whole lot here, but I know you have been following all of these issues. What do you make of the 1992 Constitution in its current form? Some people say every, 3 decades even, you should be looking at your Constitution because a Constitution, just as ours, must reflect, it's an embodiment of the aspirations of the people. But it appears we've kept ours, and for donkey years, we're just keeping it as it is. We had the 2010 Review Commission, but nothing to show. What's your take on our 1992 Constitution as it is currently? Very briefly.
Well, my take is that we are not a serious people. And the challenge has been that we have been perpetually plagued with the problem of policy discontinuities. In 2006, I was part of a study that conducted a research. I was part of a research team that conducted a study on the 1992 Constitution. The research paper came up with a recommendation that even though the 1992 Constitution had served as well, nevertheless, it contained provisions that hinder it contains provisions that hinder the maturation of our democratization process.
Right.
In other words, even though it's helped us, our drive, it at the same time hamper our drive to democratic maturity. And so we called for reforms. Professor Kwame Nkrumah was part of that study group. And around the same 2 years' time, 2008 election was conducted. Professor Mills was elected. That idea was sold to Professor Mills. Idea of constitutional review was sold to Professor Mills, I'm sure, by Professor Kwame Nkrumah. And then so he said, we're going to kickstart the process. He consulted all the political parties. They agreed, and then they started the constitutional review process. A whole lot of work has been done. The process of review, has been completed. A constitutional review implementation committee was set up, and everything was done until we got to a place where somebody sued the process. And by the time the court gave the clearance that the executive arm of government can lead the process, we were getting into the 2016 elections, and so it didn't become an issue again. So I was expecting that immediately after the 2016 election, whoever won would have followed through or would have continued the process. But typical of us, when a regime starts something, the next regime doesn't want to continue, even if people who are in the next regime were part of the previous initiative. They come in and they don't want to continue.
It's very interesting, Prof, isn't it? Because even in 1992, we had, the party in power now saying that the Constitution was not fit for purpose. They had their own complaints about the framing of the Constitution. But even when they have been in power, they have maintained the same Constitution. But very briefly to wrap on that, because there's just one other thing I want to wrap up with you on. Do you agree with Senor Hosi that the 1992 Constitution is near its death? It's on its last legs. Do you agree with him?
Well, I agree with him, and I listened to portions of the presentation, and I thought he may have done the appropriate consultations of the literature work that have been done already. And if you say, if you've consulted the literature extensively on the Constitution and its current problems and challenges that it poses to our drive towards democratic maturity, then you will not be far from right if you come up with that conclusion. My only reservation was that if you want to do an in-depth discussion of the Constitution, there are experts, experts who, in Ghana, when it comes to matters of governance, everybody wants to say something. In Ghana, when it comes to matters of political science, everybody wants to proffer a view. But these are areas that are also areas of expertise. People have extensively researched there. And so if you want a very firmed up position about them, about those areas, you work with experts.
Right.
If it's about medicine, we all respect the fact that we are not doctors. But when it's about political science or if it's about governance, then, not to take anything away from Senor Hosi and what he said. I believe, like I said, he may have done the appropriate literature scan and spoken to the right caliber of people in being able to do that excellent delivery and presentation of the paper. But my point is that when you want to talk about Constitution and the need to review it, when you want to talk about the challenges, the gaps in our Constitution, there are people who have been eating those studies, for many years. They are the people that you have to consult so that they can bring expertise and experience to bear on such delivery.
Well, Prof, this is where we're going to have to sew it up. We're very grateful, as usual, that you shared your thoughts with us. And for you, UTAG, we wish you the very best. I mean, it all points to the fact that you are continuing with the strike. So
it is our prayer. Let me make this point. That you see, you have social media political laggards who are always coming up with attacks on you simply because you are fighting to improve conditions, for improvement in our conditions of service. Let it be known to them that we are not fighting against government. We are not anti-government. Let it also be known to them that we are not teaming up with opposition. Okay. When you are fighting for your own cause, then people are saying that maybe it's some political parties who are behind and all that. Some of us, we don't believe in that. We've told the middle line from beginning of 1992 up to now. And so it is not a fight against government. It's not a fight to make government unpopular. It's not a fight to make opposition happy. We are only fighting for improved conditions of service for ourselves. That's all we are doing. And so they should tone down. And then they must also know that some of us, we have grown enough and matured enough to have that kind of skin that does not concern itself about some of the things that they say. We remain focused, and we'll keep doing the right thing. We'll keep fighting for better conditions of service until our conditions of service are improved. And that is not supposed to be taken as a fight against government, a fight to make government unpopular, or a fight that is being sponsored by opposition. Like I said, the university lecturers are thinking people, they are matured and they know what they want, and they are coming, they are demanding it. It is not because of partisan, interests, please.
Prof, thank you so much, and do have a lovely day. Professor Ransford Jampo there, lecturer, Political Science Department of the University of Ghana, senior lecturer, I should say. Right before we wrap, let me just say a very happy birthday to two people. Evans Mensah, my own colleague here. Happy birthday to you, my brother. And happy 5th birthday to Ohima Dwabin Sewa, Ottery of Jewels of the Millennium School, North Legon. May the good Lord protect and perfect you. It's from your dad and mom, Engineer Daniel Ottery of Urban Roads, and Mrs. Anita Dolores Ottery of Best Point Savings and Loans, Mile 7 branch. Up next, we have sports, all the action from the AFCON and beyond with Muftau Nabila Abdullahi. Tuesday. We start now with our big stories, and we're grateful that you've taken the time to stay with us, because this, what we're about to discuss, affects all of us. It's about our economy. And did you know, now as of September 2021, 341.8 billion, that was just how much our debt stock had hit. That is the equivalent of some 81.5% of our GDP, gross domestic product. What does all of this mean in a new year, 2022, where government does not have the E-Levy on board yet and is struggling to raise the sort of funding needed? It's been borrowing from the local market. What does that mean to private enterprises? We get into this discussion with our crack team that we've put together. But let me say a very good morning to Professor Lord Mensah of the University of Ghana Business School, senior lecturer. A very good morning to you, Prof. If you could unmute so we can hear you, Prof. Can you hear me, Professor Lord Mensah? Okay, so we'll try to rectify that situation as he joins us via Zoom. We'll also be interacting, hopefully, with Dr. Ebu Turkson, senior lecturer with the Economics Department of the University of Ghana. But in the meantime, what are the facts and the figures? Let's crunch the numbers and find out what exactly is happening with our economy. Joining me for that discussion, Isaac Kofi. He is with our research desk right here at the Multimedia Group. You're looking sharp. Good morning. Good morning. Great. So let's crunch the hard figures. Where do we start from?
Right. So now let's start with the genesis of this whole problem, the deficit. So in 2022, government plans to spend an amount of 137.5 billion in 2022.
Right.
And in terms of revenue, government's is projecting to raise an amount of 100.5 billion, which will leave a deficit of 37.
Exactly 37 billion.
37 billion.
Right.
So the question is, how are we going to fund, this 37 billion we have as deficit? That's when, borrowing and other factors come.
And even before we proceed, these are our expectations when it comes to revenue generation.
Projected.
That in itself could be problematic because that is your expected revenue generation. We don't know whether we'll actually be able to make the 100 or so billion because all of these are mopped up from different areas of
so like in 2021, we projected to raise an amount of 72.5 billion. And we're just able to do around 70 billion. So just as you said, they are projected figures. But as of, September end in 2021, our debt stock stood at 341.8 billion Ghana cedis for 2021. And domestic component, 163.7 billion, whilst external component, 178.1 billion. Now the question is, if government is borrowing from the domestic market, what is the consequences to the economy? So now let's look at the issuance calendar, which was for the first quarter of 2022. So this is the amount of money government wants to borrow in this period, in 2022, the first quarter. So in January, government is projecting to borrow an amount of 9.3 billion, Ghana cedis from the domestic markets, and it will borrow in February 7.55 billion Ghana cedis again from the domestic markets, and in March 7.65 billion Ghana cedis, which will give us a total of 24.5 billion in the first quarter of 2022.
So the highest we're looking at is in January, and following through, what would this really mean? The amounts to be issued and the domestic market. I know you're going to be telling us about that as you move on.
Exactly. Right. So now let's look at this chart. So you realize that the 24.5 billion Ghana cedis that government wants to borrow, from the domestic market, it will use 20.7 billion as rollover for maturities, like old debts. So you are spending 20.7 billion to, roll over old debts, and then you have just 3.8 billion Ghana cedis to yourself for other government expenditure in the first quarter of 2021.
Right. So right before we proceed, though, we do have Professor Lord Mensah joining the conversation. If you could unmute. Prof, good morning to you. Can you hear me, Prof? Professor Lord Mensah? Okay, we'll try to reconnect. I just wanted to at least salute you and usher you into the conversation right before we proceed. But let's move on, Kofi.
All right, now let's compare 2021 to 2022, a comparative analysis of how much we were borrowing from the local market in the first quarter of this 2 years. So now in 2021, the projected amount was 22.35 billion Ghana cedis, and in 2022, 24.5 billion Ghana cedis. Now, if you do the math, this will give you a percentage increase of 9.62%. If you compare the first quarter of 2021 and the first quarter of 2022, as far as the issuance calendar is concerned.
Any idea what could be accounting for this sharp increase? That is almost 10% in terms of issuance.
It's all because of our deficits, widening deficits. That's accounting for, government borrowing this huge amount of, money from the local markets. So let's look at the effects of, government borrowing from the local market. This is what we call the crowding out effect. The crowding out effect. So assuming this is the funds available for both government and private sector.
Right.
Government is how do you call it? It's taking away from this bowl with this huge pipe. And look at the private sector, with just this small pipe. So government is sucking away a chunk of the available, funds in the domestic market with this huge, pipe, leaving the private sector with just, some few funds
So, Isaac, to paint the picture, and this takes me back to news file with Samson Ladi Anyanini over the weekend, where Dr. Priscilla Chum was speaking, and she was talking about the fact that over the years we've not seen a real growth when it comes to private sector unemployment, the numbers they are raking in, and even what they are churning out in terms of the economy. And this could be one of the problems, because once government in itself is crowding them out when it comes to available funds locally, then it means they are going to shrink. Production is going to go down. Employment levels are going to go down.
Exactly. So what we have available for both governments and the private sector, government is taking almost everything away, leaving the private sector with just limited amount of funds to, expand businesses and then, create employment and other things. So now let's look at revenue versus expenditure. Okay. The story so far with respect to our, debt.
Before we get to that, let me try one last time. Professor Lord Mensah, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah, good morning, and good morning to our viewers.
Finally.
I can hear you loud and clear.
Finally. We're grateful to have you. Just hold for us briefly. We're engaging the numbers this morning in studio, and I'm sure you can see us. So we're just crunching the figures, and right after that, we'll get into the thick of matters with you, sir, with your agreement, so to speak. I hope that's well with you. All right. Thank you, Prof. So Ike, let's proceed. And this is crucial because since what? Is it 2012?
2012 to 2022.
We've had a steady increase in the figures. Walk us through them.
So what we have in green is the expenditure over the years, and then the red is the revenue we are generating. So if you should subtract the two, one from the other, you get the deficit. So we are looking at the widening deficits from 2012 to 2022, as far as, revenue versus expenditure is concerned. So in 2012, government was raising as high as 20.9 billion, government was spending as high as 20.9 billion and raising a total of 16.7 billion as of 2012. And fast forward to 2016, government was expending an amount of 51.1 billion and projected to raise an amount of 33.7 billion.
At least more than half.
Exactly, in 2012. Now, if you look at the widening gap, just look at it from 2019 to 2021. You could see that the gap is widening. The gap is
actually
widening.
2018 thereabouts, because right after 58.1, then we go to 67.85, and then it just balloons to 96, 113, and now 137.5
in terms of expenditure alone. So if you look at the gap, what we said earlier, 37 billion Ghana cedis, and the question is, how is government going to fund this 37 billion Ghana cedis we have as deficits in the economy?
But to be fair, Kofi, as you proceed, you would also notice from the trajectory that while our consumption or expenditure has increased, our revenue generation has increased alongside.
Exactly.
So we're getting bigger, we're expanding, our economy is expanding, so to speak. We are requiring more fuel, which is the money to shore up the system. But at the same time, we are also expecting to generate more. It's just that the figures are rising astronomically.
So it's just that you still have a very wide deficit, and that will be problematic. Although you are raising more, your expenditure also has gone up.
Right.
So here, let's look at interest payments. So from the loans we've been taking, how much are we paying as interest from 2012 to 2022? And from 2012, we're paying 2.4 billion, as interest payments as far as our loans are concerned. And then in 2019, the same story, 2018 to 2022, 15.8 billion, 2019, 19.8 billion, 2020, 24.6 billion, and in 2022, we are paying as high as 34.4 billion.
Let's look a bit at, because we know of our political system, and while we're not playing politics here, we would like to see how the different political elements have handled this. When we look at 2012, we see what? 2.4 billion. By 2016, it is 10.8 billion, almost 8 billion added on. Then we have 2016 to 2020, 10.8 billion, and now it is 19.8 billion Ghana cedis. So there to almost a 10-point increment. But from 2020 to 2022, I mean, just a matter of 2 years, less than 2 years actually, because we just entered 2022, it's moved from what, 19.8 to 37.4, almost double the sum.
Exactly. And then government is attributing this to, COVID-19 expenditure, as well as, what we have as IPP payments, And just as you said, 19.8 billion to 37.4 billion is quite, a huge... Staggering. Just look at this jump. We've never had such a jump since 2012, possibly because of, COVID. So from 19.8 billion to 37.4 billion in 2022.
And so these are the details, and I crunched the figures. When you add the 341.8 billion that is our public debt, you are looking at something around $56.9 billion. And that is the crux of the matter. But Kofi, any add-ons before we move with the conversation?
Well, the question is, how are we financing this debt? And, government is looking at two ways, drawdowns from the central bank and then borrowing from the domestic markets. And as we've explained, if you're borrowing from the domestic market, then you should be expecting, the crowding out effect. And it all depends on interest rates. So let's just hope and see that, the interest will still be below, so that you don't have a lot of, people giving out their monies to government. Because government is the safest, agent to borrow to, because if you borrow to government...
Treasury bills, for example.
Exactly.
Bonds.
So what we looked at is spans from 91-day treasury bill to as high as 10-year treasury bill. So if you have people, or you have the private sector, the domestic markets giving out all the funds to government, that will be problematic to the private sector as far as 2022 is concerned in this situation.
Kofi, wonderful stuff. Thank you so much for joining us today as well. Thank you. Let's now proceed from here and interact with Professor Lord Mensah, who is standing by. Prof, thank you for staying with us. I'd like to find out very quickly from you, Prof. So looking at the latest development when it comes to the Fitch ratings, we've received a B negative with a negative outlook. Most people would tell you these economic jargons. Well, what does that really mean? If you could break it down for us. What does that really mean in terms of where we find our economy today, right now? Did you get that question, Prof? If you could unmute for us, if you're still with us. Dr. Turkson, can you hear me? Please unmute if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Great.
Yes, I can hear you.
A pleasure to have you. If you caught the question, same one directed at you as well. This entire outlook, we hear usually from these institutions, financial institutions, credit worthiness of a country, from Fitch to all the others, Moody's and all of that. And this time we're being moved from a B to a B negative with a negative outlook. What does that imply in terms of our economy?
What it means is that the credit agencies are giving a signal to investors that in the immediate future, our fiscal indicators show that we are a bit distressed in terms of meeting our obligations for our debts.
That's the bottom line. That's all it means.
So, giving a signal to investors.
It appears the Zoom connection is not aiding us this morning. We'll try to reconnect with Dr. Ebo Turkson, and we'll try to work the lines as well to see whether we can get them over the phone lines. But in recent times, this is what we've been hit with. So we've been told that we've been downgraded in terms of the Fitch ratings. And Kofi, you're still here with me. Over time, I mean, we've again pendulated, swung from this side to that end, but this creditworthiness, at this point in time, we're battling COVID. We don't have the E-Levy on to generate the sort of funding we require, which in itself is also part of why we've got this rating, because some people also look at our creditworthiness in terms of, if we give you money, are you going to be able to meet your debt obligations? Looking at what has piled up, so what has matured up to this point, and moving forward, will you be able to meet them? That is what the international community is looking at and saying no, and that has affected our creditworthiness. When you look at the charts, it means that we're actually way down there, even in terms of comparatively to other African countries. Yeah. What does it mean from your end?
So we must work hard not to reach the dreaded triple C ratings. But at the moment, Fitch itself is saying that although it has downgraded Ghana, but it's saying that they are still sure that the country will not default in terms of its payment, because we still have approximately $7.9 billion as international reserve, which we can use as liquidity, in settling this debt that we have on our hands at the moment.
Right. Prof. Jackson, welcome back.
All right, thank you.
Great. So you were making a point. I'll just have you start off the top with what you were saying about what this really means for our economy currently.
I was saying that the implication of the downgrade is to give signals to investors who normally buy our bonds that based on the fiscal indicators as of now, we are going to be a little bit stressed in meeting our debt obligations. And that implies also that when you go on to the ICA, to borrow, the international credit capital market to borrow, those investors will be willing to give us their money to put a premium on that. And so we are going to pay a high interest rate. And that is what the downgrading means. But like I've said elsewhere, we don't need to panic about it. And so for me, what is important is that it's always come up for interrogation is, if your debt-GDP ratio is high and you look to be distressed in servicing it, you need to ask yourself, what policies have you put in place currently to grow your economy and to put the economy on the path of fiscal consolidation that will enable the economy in the immediate future to be more comfortable at servicing its debt. And for me, looking at our macroeconomy and the plan that the government has told Ghanaians is in place, I have no doubt that there are the right policies that will let this economy grow. Don't forget that in 2020, when economies were receding, the Ghanaian economy grew. 2001, it grew at about 4%. We are projected that it's going to grow around 6%. Way higher than the Sub-Saharan African average.
Right.
So it means that there are structures and policies in place as we speak to move the economy forward, in growing the economy and consolidating our fiscal strength. And so I'm not going to panic for one moment because of these credit ratings that are perception-based. And also, I'm not saying that they are not useful. They affect how much investors are willing to lend to us. But they are very short-term ratings that can change over time if the indicators show that, look, Ghana would be able to service its debt. And then the grading is upgraded, the rating is upgraded. So don't let us panic. It calls for the managers of the economy to sit up, to make sure that whatever plans were outlined in the 2022 budget are plans that we are going to meet, and so on and so forth, so that especially with our program, fiscal deficit for the year around 7.4%, which should put in place policies to ensure that we are not going to go above that.
Right.
Now, these are the sort of things that we need to do as a country. But to us, what is important in all of this is the need for us to raise enough domestic revenue. Because at the center of all of this is the issue of what is the ratio of our domestic revenue that goes into interest payments? It's high. Debt service is high. And so it means that we are going to struggle in meeting other recurrent expenditure and capital expenditure. And so it gives an impression that then our deficit is going to even be higher than we are projected. So let us look at the programs and initiatives that the government has put in place to resolve the Ghana Revenue Agency to aggressively pursue the collection of taxes.
Right.
I've heard elsewhere that, oh, it's not a matter of collection of taxes. Yes. Once we increase our domestic revenue, there are a lot of people in this economy that don't pay tax. And so, as we make use of the digitization agenda or the drive that we've achieved so far to pursue tax collection efforts, I think that's the right direction.
Okay.
So Ghana shouldn't panic. Yes, it's worth looking at this. It's worth discussing, but we shouldn't panic just because we've got a downgrade in our rating.
Right. Prof, so I'll be talking about sitting up and what it really is going to entail. But you just spoke about taxes. And that's another interesting, perspective to look at, because even the taxes we do mop up, even from the population that we have, we don't make the most of it. There are so many slippages. I mean, the Ghana Statistical Service itself, the Auditor General, came out with data pointing to the fact that in the last year, slippages, wastage led to about 12 billion of taxes, getting dissipated, going into being siphoned into individual pockets and all of that, graft. And we're looking at 6.9 billion for an E-Levy. You see the disparity in there. If we had tackled some of these slippages, though the tax net is smaller than we would have it be, we could have been tackling some of our problems and probably wouldn't find ourselves where we do now. So is it a matter of getting more taxes? It's like pouring water into a basket, or is it tightening the system to ensure that we can make the most of the little we do have? What do you think?
Exactly. I mean, so when I say we need to increase tax mobilization efforts, I'm not meaning that we need to introduce new taxes and all of that. Like you rightly said, we need to be very efficient. We need to ensure that our public sector is very efficient, and those slippages that leave the system that should have been revenue that is collected is minimized. I mean, there is no doubt that these things will happen, and there should be institutions in place to ensure that if it does happen, people are punished to serve as a deterrent, and even there are policies in place to ensure that those leakages do not occur. So you rightly said it, we should be very efficient in the mobilization of our domestic resource basket. But most importantly, I think that in all of this, providing the right support to the Ghana Revenue Agency should help. We need to also take advantage of our digitization drive to also ensure that businesses that go online, the government is able to collect the taxes that have to be collected. And as Ghanaians, we need to also come to a realization that we can only fund our development and no one else. I mean, if we're raising enough revenue to fund our development, this issue of our international capital market and all of that will not come up. So it's important that as Ghanaians, I'm not calling for the introduction of new taxes, but we should be up to our civil responsibilities to try as much as possible to pay taxes when we are supposed to pay, especially for those in the informal sector, and for us to be a little bit protected by ensuring that in whatever role we play, wherever it is, we ensure that some of these leakages out of the tax revenue stream are minimized.
Right.
And it's very, very important. And also, it's important that the government will also ensure that the public sector is very efficient in its expenditure. Rationalize our expenditure and make sure that we are being very efficient.
Right.
So that at the end of the day, our fiscal deficit would be manageable, and then it begins to give a clear signal to the credit rating agencies that Ghana is doing something about it.
Okay.
I've had discussions about Ghana going back to the IMF for credibility, because that is what can only assure the investors that we are doing something about our situation and there's no need for panic. I mean, if it gets to that point, and that's what we need, I don't have any problem if the government will go back to the IMF. For the IMF to assure that the plans that the government has put in place would be carried out to its conclusion, so that we can have a little bit of reduced interest rates on the international capital market.
Right. Let's move the conversation forward. I don't know whether we have Professor Lord Mensah, so I'll continue with you, Professor Turkson. And right before I get into our back-breaking debts, the staggering debt we have to deal with now, I just want your quick take, very quickly on this one. Since we're talking about taxation, and you say you are not against taxation, are you for the E-Levy? To what extent are you for the E-Levy at 1.75%? What is your quick take on that? A nuisance?
I mean, the whole concept of the E-Levy, which targets online businesses, online transactions, it's the right thing to do. I mean, in almost every part of this world, most countries are moving to using digital technology to mobilize revenue.
I know. I think it's Cameroon or one of those neighboring countries that attempted 0.2% or so, and people were kicking vehemently against it. We are looking at 1.75%.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm going to that point. So what I was saying is that this E-Levy thing is not a bad thing. Possibly, I think that if there was enough consultation before this proposal came up, there would have been enough buying into the rate at which the initial proposal was envisaging to collect. I think that for what the E-Levy is going to be used for, some for the substitute for the road tolls that have been cancelled. I think that we could find other ways of collecting road tolls,
right?
And so that we can reduce the percentage of the E-Levy.
Okay.
I mean, road tolls are supposed to be paid by vehicle users. I mean, so if I'm in the village and I don't drive on the road, I'm not supposed to pay a road toll. Those are road tolls have been cancelled. Why don't we look for a way in which we can collect a lump sum from every car that is renewed, is roadworthy for the year? That alone could collect some revenue to fund the part of the E-Levy that was supposed to go into the road tolls. That is one of them.
Okay.
One country, for instance, increased taxes on alcohol and cigarettes. And the reason why I'm saying that is that the IMF has clearly indicated that Ghana is one of the middle-income countries that collects the lowest tax from these two. In economics, these are two products that, for revenue purposes, you can increase taxes on them and increase your revenue.
Okay.
If even it leads to a fall in the demand, the total revenue from that increased taxes is still higher than before. And if it causes a reduction in demand, it's also good for us because of the health implications of consuming these two products.
Okay, so these
So we
are
not
two
killing
areas.
two birds with one stone.
Right.
It's something that the government can also take a look at. So that once this is done, then that 6.9 billion that we hope to collect, we'll find out if we can reduce the percentage.
Right, the tax component.
One, and then if you can increase the threshold, if we still insist on collecting the Momo E-Levy, we can increase the threshold to maybe 200 cities or 300 cities.
Okay, so these are concessions that could be made.
Average artisans who collect some of their payments in Momo, 80 cities, 100, 120 cities will not suffer, especially those who collect their daily, what do you call it, allowance.
Right.
Through Momo will not suffer for it because they have.
Prof,
they have
just hold your horses.
Just
hold your horses on this point a brief moment. Let me connect with Professor Lord Mensah as well. Prof, can you hear me? Professor Mensah?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you loud and clear.
Great. Good to have you. Are you surprised about this downgrade of our economy in terms of our credit worthiness? And I'll have you go back. I have in my hand the Republic Press newspaper from the 26th of April 2021. It had to do with Sam Jonah's comments on the economy. And this is what he said. One of the most alarming aspects of our macroeconomic situation is the debt crisis. As at the end of 2020, total public debt reached 291.6 billion, representing 76.1. Now we've hit what? 340 plus billion, and it's into the 80% or approaching around 80%. He also goes on to talk about the fact that thus we are borrowing to consume and to service existing debts rather than for productive investment. This is from April 2021. This is January 2022, and we are seeing some of the very things that Sam Jonah said. So any surprise to you that we find ourselves with a downgrade and in dire straits in terms of our economy?
Yeah, I'm not surprised at all. If you look at our presence on the Eurobond market since 2007, beyond the 2007, every time we go to the market, if you look at the prospectus, you come to understand that we borrowed to defray, already existing debt, for which just some small amount comes into the economy to grow the economy. So, for instance, if our first time of going to the Eurobond market, we turned out we borrowed around 700 million. The subsequent year, we went there to borrow 900 million. Then it tells you that, okay, fine. We use the 700 to defray already existing debt. And then, the 200 comes into the economy to grow the economy. But then you ask yourself, why did we find ourselves in that situation? As of the time we're going to the Eurobond market, you realize that, we were fresh on the market. So borrowing very long term was difficult. And I remember very well, I think the first time we went there to borrow, it was about 7 years or so. Then you ask yourself, where are you coming to put the money to? I mean, where the investment you are coming to do with that money? Would they be able to generate, cash within that 7 years that you are borrowing for? That's the question we failed to answer at the time. You realize that we borrowed, but then the money went into projects which couldn't pay itself within the 7 years. So we had to go and borrow to come and what? To defray, already existing debt. Now, coming back to the ratings, you realize that the ratings are mostly outlook. And all the indicators that goes in there, if you sum it up, is our macroeconomic indicators, our debt levels, and then also your ability to raise, revenue in the future. Now, if you take, last budget that we read, I mean, clearly, it looks like all the policies, revenue enhanced policies that the government tends to roll out seem to be falling on rocks. Because if you take the E-Levy, the plan was that it has to kick on within in January. But look at where we are now. And then if you take the benchmark value reduction, also it's having problems. And clearly, it tells you that government is struggling when it comes to the ability to implement some of its revenue enhanced policies. And so, if you are to create an economy of this nature, obviously you're going to downgrade it, because if you will be able to pay your debt, it has to do with your ability to raise money. And so, I always say that we shouldn't relate even our debt to GDP. We should relate it to our revenue generation. And so the ability to raise money keeps on reducing every now and then. And that is why we find ourselves in this downgrade. And for me, I'm not surprised in that regard at all.
When it comes to the E-Levy, which is a question that I just ran by Professor Ebutoksin, as an alternative means of raising or raking in money to cushion the economy, he says, well, he is for it, taxation, because other countries pay taxes. I averted to his mind to the fact that I think neighboring Cameroon even tried 0.2%. It was poo-pooed. What do you think of that, especially standing at 1.75%? Is it feasible ahead of Parliament reconvening on the 25th? Very quickly on that one, Professor Mensah.
Very good. It's unfortunate, a country like Ghana will be relying on taxes and levies to build its economy. I mean, we were here when we had promises like from taxation to production. And if we are to move from taxation to production, then we should expect that, the drivers of revenue generation for this economy should be production. But we didn't see that. But then let's look at the E-Levy per se. Yeah, clearly, the E-Levy, I'm not against E-Levy. I mean, every economy when you exhaust all your resources, I mean, we had diamond, we had gold, we had, recently petrol and all those. You realize that relying on it for some time, it's going to dwindle. You cannot continue to rely on revenue from these, natural resources forever. And so once you lose your natural resources, the replacement is human resource. And taxes evolves around human activities. So as a result of that, if you are going to, raise revenue through levies and taxes, I'm not against it. But sometimes the margins that the government wants to rake in, and then sometimes the hardships that the economic agents are facing may not necessarily help in introducing things like that. So for instance, if you want to introduce taxes or levies, you should expect that every now and then, economic agent, if I say economic agent, I'm talking about, government is of the economic agent, also part economic agent, and then individuals are also part of the economic agent. If you want to introduce taxes, then you have to make sure that the economic agent and you introduce taxes, they will not feel it as expected. What do we see? For the past 5 years, we see only government in business. The reason why I'm saying this is that even though we can see monetary policy rate coming down and all those, at the banking hall, interest rate is not down. For individuals to confidently walk to the bank and say, I'm coming to borrow, for businesses to walk to the banks to say that I'm coming to borrow, and then I'll use that to expand my business, and therefore I'm going to employ, and through the employment, people will be engaged. And once they get engaged and they go on talk on their phone every now and then, you can start, taxing them. Once they start getting engaged and they get employed and they are transferring funds from one part of the economy to the other, you should be able to tax them. But this is not the case. That is why you always see, the economic agent resisting anytime government tries to introduce a levy. And so I would say that, yes, fine, I'm for it. But in the end, the economy must be well engaged. The people within the economy must be well engaged before you start introducing, such taxes. And then also, being the first time of its, thought, you don't just jump to 1.75. You could have whet the people's appetite for some time. Now, as we speak now, Ghanaians are new to this levy. And therefore, if you want to introduce it, make sure that you introduce it in a manner where anytime, you rake in, you put it in an investment, you float investment to indicate that your money is doing. And so therefore, you gradually whet their appetite. So I would have loved, government should have done a bit of consultation to start with a certain,
Right. Thank you for making that point.
Before,
Okay, hold briefly for me, Professor Mensah, because there's something else I'd like you to look at briefly. But before that, Professor Turkson, so I just want us, Kofi, if you could just let me take a look at the figures. So from 2012, right from where you were. So from 2012, we're looking at, can I just take a look at that figure? We're looking at 20.9 billion Ghana cedis in terms of our expenditure. Prof, I'm just doing an expenditure revenue analysis here. 20.9 billion in terms of expenditure versus 16.7 billion estimated. You come to 2022, and our estimate in terms of revenue generation is 100.5, but it has ballooned our expenditure to 137.5 billion Ghana cedis. Is this sustainable over a period of just about 10 years? Look at how our expenditure has ballooned. Is this sustainable for an economy like ours?
I think that we should look at the reasons for, by taking a look at expenditure items and the reason why it has ballooned to that level. The economy as we speak has to grow. There are a lot of young men and women who are in the labor force who are looking for work and have not been employed. So any government that would be responsible for its citizens, we're looking at initiatives to try as much as possible to support the private sector to create those jobs for the youth. And that will come with a lot of investment. So if we do not mind, we can have a discussion on the content of our expenditure and not look at the whole sum in totality. Because
Prof, let's quickly do that. And I would like to single out one thing. Unemployment, for example, youth unemployment. This entire gargantuan sum that we're seeing out there, you look at the unemployment figures, and yes, we've had a number of policies and all of that. We've had NAPCO and all of that. But when you look at the real figures in there, it doesn't appear we are winning the battle when it comes to youth unemployment, for example. Again, you juxtapose that with the fact that, and I heard, I was making reference to what Dr. Chum of the economics department, your department at the University of Ghana, had been saying on Newsfile on Saturday that even the private sector is not growing in terms of its numbers, its output, the number of Ghanaians it is bringing in terms of job creation. So would you really say that what we've been expending is really having an effect on what we're expecting, our expenditure versus the expected outcomes?
No, I mean, so for instance, if you take the youth employment programs, initiatives in the budget, I also believe that there are too many of them. And I think that there is a lot of duplication that is going on. And because there's a lot of money that is also expended on these initiatives, it will be important for government to come back, look at the agencies that are involved under the different ministries, and try as much as possible to put them together to avoid the duplication and to give proper support that would offer the jobs for the young men and women. And I think that if we do that and reduce the amount that we spend on such youth employment initiatives, and rather use it to support the private sector, they are the ones that are supposed to generate employment. And so it is important, like Dr. Taviefe said, that the government supports the private sector to expand. And one way in which we can do that is to look at agro-processing. And I'm happy about the 1D1F because a lot of the firms that are being set up or those that are already existing and are being supported by government are in agro-processing. Now, this is very early, in the early stages of its initiative. So let us look rather at the medium term, how this 1D1F, with the number of factories that are being built up, is going to provide the jobs that the youth need. And that is very important. So like I said, we need to take a look at what extent are we committing the chunk of our expenditure to expanding the productive capacity of our economy. If you look at the 10-point industrial transformation agenda of the current government,
right,
are we pursuing that agenda to meet the objectives? There are so many things that we need to do, like, for instance, improving the business environment. And I know there are a lot of things that are going on now, and resourcing the public sector agencies that provide support for the private sector to flourish. So we are doing the right thing as we speak. The benefits of that will come later on. But as we do that, we should ensure that every amount of resources, whether we borrow it or we raise from our domestic resource, that is going into expenditure should be in furtherance of expanding the productive capacity of this economy. It's very, very critical.
Right.
So we need a much more, for instance, I've said it earlier part of last year, that we need to begin to have conversations on some of the expenditure items. Do we need that big size of parliament? Can we have a conversation of reducing the size of parliament, for instance?
Right.
So that we can also reduce some of the expenditure items. Can we have a conversation on the maximum number of ministers and deputy ministers that Ghana would be able to fund?
I mean, I heard someone recently make mention of the fact that, I've forgotten whether it was Professor Jampo who was talking about the fact that the fuel they get for free, for example, can we mitigate that, ensuring that maybe they are paying for the fuel, or maybe even...
Precisely. I mean,
yes.
this is the conversation that we need to have. So that, because for me, even though democracy is one of the best things that have happened to us, it's looking like it's becoming too expensive for us. So
right.
we are always struggling to try to look for resources to meet our expenditure.
Right.
So we need to begin to have conversations on that to see if we can be more efficient.
Okay.
Also reducing the size of government, reducing the size of parliament, and ensuring that the parliamentary service is a service to the nation and not necessarily one that people would move in because they need to make money.
Okay.
It's very, very important. So that if we begin to see lawmakers as lawmakers and ensure that our local government system, which is one of the best in the world, is resourced to be what it is, then our representation will be on the local government.
Okay.
The local government will be the development agents and not members of parliament.
Okay.
We will focus on providing the laws and the legislature and all of those things that are important for Ghana's development process.
Okay.
These are the conversations that we should be having. And I think that insofar as we are still expending, our budget deficit is always going to hang around our neck. And that is why it factors into some of these credit agencies' ratings of our economy. And they are concerned whether we are even going to be able to meet the 7.4% budget deficit for 2020.
Right.
Others have said that we might hit
Right.
10% or 11%.
Right.
When these signals go out there, even the credit agents would have to downgrade our ratings and let the investors know that, look, if you are giving money to Ghana, be careful because the future doesn't hold good in terms of fiscal indicators. But we can do something about it.
Okay. And there are a number of things you have proffered, but for the sake of time, Prof, we're going to have to leave it here. Professor Turkson, we're so grateful you took the time off to join us this morning, sir.
Thank you for the privilege.
We're very grateful. And that was Professor Abel Turkson, Senior Lecturer, Economics Department, University of Ghana. Professor Lord Mensah, are you still with us? Can you hear me?
Yes, I am. I am.
Great. So I'm going to dedicate the rest of the time on this to you because your connection has not been very good. And I just want to find out from you. So when you look at the numbers, when it comes to how much government is hoping to take from the domestic market, Kofi, can you just put that figure there when it comes to the crowding out effect? So the crowding out effect. I think it's the next slide to your right. Next one. Okay, so government is hoping to get some 20.7 billion locally. Okay, 20.7 billion. I think it's the next one, Kofi. Let's do the one with, yes, that one. So you realize that the chunk of money that government is hoping to secure from the local front is going to have a pull-down effect on local industry because they are also going to be hoping to get something from that same pool of money. And crowding out is going to happen. What is going to be, what do you foresee being the impact of this on the local market? Because local industry is going to be hoping to tap from the same pool that government is going to get this chunk out of. What do you foresee being the impact?
I mean, this has been happening all this while. I mean, it's not now that government is going to boom, but, the biggest funds that is floating in the system or the investable funds. Government over the years, looking at the policies that are being rolled out or that has been rolled out, clearly has indicated that they are going to be in business, not a private man. They are going to be in business in a sense that even though we boast of monetary policy coming down to a level where, we've not been before, it is not transmitting directly to the banking hall. And with the reforms and all those restructuring of the reference rate, clearly you could see that that exercise was not an exercise that was supposed to be, because we thought earlier on that the banks are pricing loans based on their internal structures and based on their internal characteristics, and therefore let's shift the pricing of loan, the baseline of pricing of loan, to the market. That is when the current administration came in and earlier on, they introduced what we call the Ghana reference rate, which is mainly driven by the monetary policy rate, the treasury bill rate, and all those. And clearly, the monetary policy rate has been coming down, but we don't see that reflection in the loan pricing. And so the private sector has not been having the access to funds over the years. And this could also be as a result of liquidity issues, because it could be that the banks don't have the necessary funds to lend. And the little that they have, because government has more affinity to attract investable funds, they would like to invest with the banks. Sorry, they would like to invest with the government, and therefore invest in treasury bills and all those. If you catalog the asset side of the banks, you could see clearly that most of their investments are with the Ghana government in bills. And so clearly this has been happening over the years, and that is why we don't see much expansion when it comes to the private sector. And anytime government indicate that signal of being in business when it reaches out budget, providing for the people directly without channeling it through the the banking sector or the corridors of the banks, clearly it gives you the signal that yes, the private man will be struggling along the line. So this has been happening. It's not now. It's not now that we're going to see that this crowding out effect. The private man, access to funds has been limited over the years, and it's not now, please.
Right. Initially, earlier, you were speaking about production. And this is where it gets interesting, because even in our productive industry, we have quite a lot to digest. So we are looking at the fact that about 50%, mining contributes about 50% of FDI, foreign direct investment. Of that, gold alone contributes some 90% in terms of Ghana's total mineral exports, and 49% of the country's total export value. Now put that side by side with the reality of finite resources, and this is what I mean. In 1994, South Africa was producing about 20 million ounces of gold when the global total was about 81 million ounces, which means that South Africa alone was producing about 25% of the global output. You bring that to 2020, when Ghana took over as the #1 producer. South Africa is no longer the biggest producer in Africa when it comes to gold. Ghana was not on the radar, not on the charts at the time. Here we are in 2022 as the biggest producer of gold on the continent. But again, the reminder is that this is a finite resource. You look at our black gold, the oil that now we're finding practically everywhere. That too, many countries are beginning to move away from fossil fuel. Some will say that it will take quite a bit of time. But the point to be made is that with even our natural resources and production, nothing is guaranteed moving forward. So what do you think we can do with these? I mean, who knows what in 20, 40 years, how many gold resources we would have left, how many oil resources we would have left. What do you foresee that we should be doing to prevent even tighter constraints on our economy as far as production and our mineral resources are concerned?
Well, I like your question, and with the direction where you are coming from, that mineral resource cannot be relied on for a longer term. So effectively, whilst you're having it now, your policies are supposed to be oriented in such a way that you develop into the future. If you know very well that your black gold has no future, what are you doing with the revenues that are being raked in from your black gold? Do you invest in the people so that they can be innovative, so that they can move into areas that can help the economy without, necessarily relying on that black gold in the future? So it depends on what you do with the cash flows that comes from the black gold. Now, we had gold. I grew up in a mining area, Akwetia, for instance. I mean, typically, it was an area where diamond was, something that you can easily boast of. Early morning, you can even wake up and pick diamond. It's no more. Did we invest in the people over there? If you go to Akwetia now, it's one of the poorest, parts of Eastern region, as you can imagine. And I can tell you the reason why we're struggling like that. Because as of the time that revenue was being generated from the diamonds, we never turned up to look at the people what they can do if the diamond should, go away. So we always have to look at the future. Now that, fossil fuel has become more or less an enemy to the globe, looking at these climate change issues and all those, what are we doing going forward to think about alternatives? Even if we are supposed to import, alternative, use of what we call it, revenue, fossil fuel, can we, cope with the situation? How are we positioning our economy to ensure that we can also go with, that no fossil fuel kind of economies in the future? So these are all things that we may have to look at when it comes to our revenue reorientation. Sorry, our policy reorientations.
Okay, and speaking of policy reorientation, so just to wrap the conversation, Prof, I've heard Bright Simmons, recently he put up a tweet concerning the fact that we are practically broke as an economy, as a country. Prior to that, we had the likes of finance analyst, expert, Joe Jackson of Dalex Finance saying, he's been saying this since last year, that we are broke. Sam Jonah has been pointing to the fact that we're approaching brokenness, if you like. I spotted this little bit of analysis on social media, and I wanted to share with you. I don't know what your take is. I want you to answer, are we broke? And do you agree with this person who says, clearly, the issue is not that Ghana is broke, but that it is broken. To mend its broken policy making and restore the country to creditworthiness, the government and its enabling political class must admit the brokenness of the current public finance model and solicit genuine multi-stakeholder support to cut another path. What do you make of whether we are broke or not and this person's suggestions? To wrap the conversation, Prof.
Well, I would say we are not broke. Ghana is never broke. A country that is broke has no ability to generate, revenue. Now, if you look at, Ghana as a country, I would say that we're not broke, but we are not able to prioritize our, spending. And that is what is making it looks as if the country is broke. We're not broke, because a country that will be able to generate revenue of about 70 billion Ghana cedis, what makes it a broke country? Now, if you look at the policies that are being churned out over the years, even in our recent budget, you could see that government tries to, put in measures to enhance revenue, right? But then the only difficult thing is that government hasn't got a political will to look at the expenditure side. If you look at the expenditure side carefully, you realize that there are some key areas you may not want to touch. And at the end of the day, if you relate that to our revenue, you realize that more or less what we generate is what is what we can spend. We are not doing that. What we're doing in this country is that we're spending more than necessary. We're spending into efficient sectors of the economy. All our expenditure is going into areas which is not necessarily generating revenue back in the system. When we talk about efficient spending, in economics, what we mean is that, you see, your revenue is your output. Your expenditure is more or less an input. So relate the expenditure to the input. If for nothing at all, whatever you spend on should be able to generate, revenue as expected going forward. So a country that is broke cannot, raise revenue as, indicated in our budget over the years. So we are not broke, but it's a matter of, prioritizing our expenditure.
Right. Professor Lord Mensah, thank you so much for your time with us. Professor Lord Mensah is a lecturer at the University of Ghana Business School. Do have a good day, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Great. And just to wrap in the studio, Kofi, so you've patiently, had us discuss all of this. What would be your takeaways in just about 30 seconds, 1 minute? What would be your major takeaways from this discussion?
Well, Ben, you have a deficit of 37 billion to finance. Now you've lost access to the international market. The question is, are we going to see, government's pipe, in the domestic market widening to crowd out the private sector? If so, if you compare, just like Lord Mensah said, Professor Lord Mensah said, if you compare our debt to our revenue that we are generating, projected revenue, it means that our debt levels is about more than three times what we are projecting to generate in 2022, and that is problematic.
Very problematic. Well, we hope we can get out of the doldrums. But Kofi, thank you so much for joining me this morning. How much do you know about the Smarts app as a parent, for example, and how much do you know about what it can do for your children or your wards? Well, stay with us. In the next few minutes, we'll be catching up with them and we'll find out how exactly you can help your children learn better right here on the AM Show.